I have a name for these kind of questions. These, when you first see them, I think in all the grade 12 questions you could get, I would say these are the scariest looking. Because when you read them, there's lots of words. There's 2 Greek letters. That's already scary. But these are quite predictable, and once you learn how to do them, quite easy. Okay? I call them double triangle questions. Again, sometimes when you give something a name and you remember the name, and then when you recognize the question as a double triangle question, that allows you to solve them that much easier. The reason why we call them a double triangle question is because we're going to draw one triangle for the angle alpha, one triangle for the angle beta, and then from that we'll be able to solve the question easily. So the name itself helps us remember the strategy that we're going to solve it. There's always going to be information in a double triangle question to tell you what quadrant an angle's in and what all the sides are. So for example, the angle alpha, this one was super easy because they already told us it's in quadrant 3. So when we go to draw our alpha triangle, we're going to draw it with a reference angle. There's our alpha reference angle in quadrant 3. And if we know that cos of alpha is -3/5, well, cos is adjacent over hypotenuse. You know this side was 3 and this side is 5. A squared plus b squared equals c squared, or maybe you recognize the triangle. 4. 3, 4, 5. Very famous triangle. So now, because of this, we already knew cos of alpha was -3/5. You now know sine of alpha as well. Also negative because it's in quadrant 3. But you know that sine of alpha is -4/5. There's our first triangle. We also have enough information to draw a triangle for beta. It's in quadrant 2, so we can draw a triangle in quadrant 2 and label our reference angle for beta. And we know that sine of beta is 1/3, so opposite over hypotenuse. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. And you'll get square root of 8 for the other side. So we already knew that sine of beta was 1/3. We now know cos of beta is √8/3. And because it's in quadrant 2, it'll be negative. The reason we draw both of these triangles is the question is asking us to find sine alpha plus beta. And from our formula sheet, we know that sine alpha plus beta is sine alpha cos beta plus cos alpha sine beta. The next step I'm going to get you to do, and I'm going to do a survey based on that step, because on average, the first time that you do this step, about 50% of students do one thing and 50% do another. So I want you to, again, recognize if you're going to make the mistake, make it right now. Go with what your gut tells you you should do as the next step, and write it down, because if your gut tells you the wrong thing now, it'll tell you the wrong thing on a quiz or test, and I want you to fix that right away, rather than have that develop for a longer time. So I'm going to come around with a survey. You just have to write the next step. The main question here is, do we write sine of -4/5, or do we just write -4/5? We have to ask ourselves, do we know what alpha equals, or do we know what all of sine alpha equals? We know all of sine alpha equals -4/5, so we can replace all of sine alpha with -4/5. We can replace all of cos beta with -√8/3. All of cos alpha with -3/5. And all of sine beta with 1/3. So since we know those things, we can put them in right away. Now it's just a matter of simplifying. We need to write our answer as one fraction in the end. Well, negative times negative will be positive 4 root 8 over 15 minus 3 over 15. So our final answer will be 4 root 8 minus 3 all over 15. And if you look at the back of the book, they've changed the root 8 to 2 root 2, but it would be fine to leave it like this. So in these double angle questions, double triangle questions, you draw both triangles. That will give you sine and cos. Then when you go to the formula, you can just plug it in, and then from there, simplify your fraction to get your final answer. You can recognize these double angle ones because they're going to ask you to find, and there's going to double triangle ones, they're going to ask you to find sine alpha plus beta, cos alpha plus beta, and then you'll always have enough information to draw the triangles. This one was particularly easy because they told you the quadrants. Okay? I could tell you quadrant 3 in another way. I could say cos of alpha is negative 3 over 5. That tells you already it's 2 or 3. Can you see that from your cast rule? And then instead of this, maybe I tell you something like cotangent theta is greater than 0. Because then you know it's 1 or 3. And if this is 1 or 3 and this one is 2 or 3, the only possibility would be quadrant 3. So you'll also see these questions with not as easy to tell it's quadrant 3. You have to do a little bit of work first. Okay, the questions you can do for this one are 8 and 13.